Welcome everyone to our third webinar on motivational interviewing. My name is Livia Ediger and I'm the Deputy Director of the International Society of Substance Use Professionals, also known as ISSUP. We are an international membership organization with more than 12,000 members who work in drug demand reduction all around the world. For those of you who do not know us, just a little bit on ISSUP, we provide drug demand reduction professionals with access to training, with access to credentialing, with opportunities to build networks, share their knowledge, and learn from each other's work and experience through our website, through our events, and through our partner organizations and national chapters. I would like to invite you all to become ISSUP members if you haven't already, so that you can join our global community of prevention, treatment, and recovery support professionals. Our membership is for free, and you can apply for membership via our website. If you go to www.issup.net, you can apply for membership. There's an application that you need to fill out, and then we approve you. And once you have access, you can start engaging with other professionals around the world via our website. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to our esteemed presenter, Dr. Igor Koutsenok, for holding this fantastic webinar series. The webinars have been such a great success, and Igor really has such wealth of information and materials to share with all of us. And I'm really excited looking at the numbers again. We're going up again and again, and thank you so much again for all of you joining us. And we have decided, because it's been such a great success and because Igor has again so much information left to share with us, that we have added a fourth session for tomorrow at the same time. So we hope that you will all be able to join us tomorrow at this time. It is now my honor to introduce Igor. He is a professor of psychiatry at the University of California in San Diego. He is the director of the Center for Addiction Research, Training, and Application. He's also the director of the SAMHSA PEPFAR International Addiction Technology Transfer Center in the Ukraine, and a co-director of the SAMHSA PEPFAR Southeast Asia Addiction Technology Transfer Center. He's also vice president of the International Consortium of Universities on Drug Demand Reduction, also known as ICUDDR. At the end of Igor's presentation today, we'll have time for a short Q&A session. So please send us your questions in through the chat function on the GoToWebinar control panel. We're sorry that we can really, unfortunately, not answer all the questions. We do receive quite a lot of questions, but we hope that you can send us the questions, and we will otherwise share them with Igor, and also feel free to send us questions afterwards. Our communications manager, James Harvey, is with us today, and he will lead us through the Q&A session later after Igor's presentation. So thank you again for being with us, Igor, and it's over to you now.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for I don't know what time zone are you at, but anyway, I'm really glad to see you, or even though I don't see you, but I know that you are here and we are together. These are strange times and strange circumstances, and as you can see, we can still do some meaningful work even under very unusual circumstances, something that we have never experienced before. So I hope you're all safe. I hope you're all healthy and your families are okay. And we will continue with our journey into the motivational interviewing. And hopefully that some of your questions, by the way, I received a couple of wonderful, wonderful questions from many of you. Some of the questions will be answered. Last time, if you remember, we started dealing with working on the specific 4 fundamental skills in motivational interviewing, that the acronym is OARS: open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. We talked about the questioning, different types of questions, why do we need them, what do we need them for, what can we get from questions, what we cannot get through questioning. Then we talked about affirmations, different specific things in affirmations. They must be specific, they must be as close as to the behavior as possible. And then we started with reflections. And we will continue working on reflections today. Why do we spend so much time on reflections? If you remember, I told you last time, we know from research And actually, let me tell you, let's take you a little bit back in the history. The source, the roots of motivational interviewing, going back to Carl Rogers' clinical psychology and Rogerian type of psychotherapy. Rogers had been a very, very observing psychotherapist, and very quickly he realized that through his clinical practice, that the traditional psychotherapy approach, when you have a client and you're a psychotherapist, you know what to do, you're a smart guy with a bunch of certificates behind you, blah blah blah. So you tell people what to do, they will do it, and they will be fine. This approach, sometimes it does work for some, but for most people it doesn't. And he also recognized that reflecting on people's thoughts, feelings, or actions actually will prompt more conversations by the client. And he also recognized that the more the client is talking about the possibility of change, even the potential of change, the more likely the change will happen. And he also recognized that the more we talk about the necessity for the client to change, this will automatically make the client defensive. So one of the skills in reflective listening is the skill of empathetic listening in general. Before we continue with reflections, I really want to make sure we have good understanding what empathetic listening is like. I do appreciate sometimes the impulse that we all have as helping professionals to jump into solutions, to tell people, here is the way you can solve the problem. The second we do it, unfortunately, most likely, the typical reaction, people will start trying to prove how wrong we are. So now we are in a wrestling match rather than in a therapeutic interaction. It is really important, even if you think as a professional that the solution is obvious, try to suppress your desire to do that and try to continue listening with the intent to understand, rather than intent to respond and give advice. I want you to watch something that's both educational and a little bit funny, and I think this is a good way to start the webinar today.
It's just, there's all this pressure, you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me, and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
Yeah, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See,
out.
you're not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just... sometimes it's like there's this achy... I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. Ow. If you would just...
Don't...
Try to see things my way.
Okay, I think you got a little bit of laughter here. Let me remind you a couple of things we talked yesterday. Not yesterday, the last time. One of the main functions of reflection is to make sure that we understood our client correctly. Because there are many things, many reasons why we can make a mistake in our understanding what the person is actually saying. We also talked about the that people, if you look at the studies, if you look at the literature, and there are lots of literature, people tend to talk more in response to reflections, much more than responding to questions. And this is exactly what we want. This is what Carl Rogers observed, that when people talk, the patients, the clients, talk more about the potential of change, the more likely the change will happen. So it's really, for us, it's a good strategy, learning strategy, to learn when not to talk. You know, one of my favorite musicians, Eric Clapton, a brilliant guitar player, they call him a slow hand. And the reason why, he's not just a brilliant musician, he knows really well when not to make a sound. This is a mastery in music, and this is a mastery in counseling, and including in motivational interviewing. And we also talk that reflections always sound like statement, not as questions. And what makes it sound like a statement is when the tone of our voice goes down at the end of the sentence instead of going up, which will sound like a question to the clients. There are different types of reflections. And let me start this webinar by talking about different types of reflections and different reasons why we would use them. In general, there are two types of reflections: simple and complex. A simple reflection, and by the way, it may sound quite difficult for you, but by the end of the webinar today, it will really be clear. Trust me on that. A simple reflection is we either repeat exactly what the person said, repeat it back, or we a little bit rephrase. We don't use exactly the same wording, but we are not adding any meaning. We're just putting the mirror. Here is what you just said. I just want to make sure that I understood you correctly. So you're not adding anything. You are not paraphrasing anything. You're just repeating back. Here is what you just said. Help me understand if I understood you correctly. You know, the simple reflection, I told you about the accuracy function. You're just clarifying that what you have heard actually is exactly what the person said. You're also sending a message that, yes, I'm here, I'm listening, I'm curious, I want to learn more about your story. And at the same time, folks, you can't get wrong with simple reflections, particularly if you see that the person is getting defensive. If a client is getting defensive and resistant, reflect. Just make a simple reflection. If you don't know where to go, if you don't know how to continue, it happens. Reflect. Just say it. Say the truth. You know, I don't know how to continue this session with you. I would probably appreciate your help. You never get wrong with reflections. And reflection, simple reflection, is the quickest, the easiest, the fastest way to reduce the defensiveness. At the same time, we have a number of so-called complex reflections. The complex reflections, they serve a different purpose. Imagine you have 15 doors and you have 15 keys, but you don't know which key opens what door. So what are you going to do? You will make a hypothesis. My hypothesis is that this key will open that door, and you will start trying. And it does not necessarily work. Typically, it doesn't. So you try, you test until you open the door. This is the function, the main function of complex reflections. The complex reflection, we use them to test different hypotheses that we have, and then listen very carefully and observe the reaction. The reaction could be defensiveness. Then it means, sorry, I probably misunderstood you. Help me understand it better. Or you might get a very, very interesting reaction from the client, particularly in the area of the value system, what is important for the person, and many other things. So the complex reflections means we do not repeat exactly what the person said. We're adding some meaning, we're testing different hypotheses, and we're very carefully, we're observing the reaction, what the reaction is going to be. I will tell you more, and I will give you more examples. We will even practice with you. I want you to see a short video. This is a real session between Dr. Terry Moyers, she's one of the best professionals in motivational interviewing in the world, and the real client. This is not a scripted interaction, it's a real client, and the client who is quite defensive and very ambivalent. And I want you to see her way of using reflections to diffuse the defensiveness. And before showing you the video, let me remind you something that is fundamentally important for me in any level of counseling, any type of counseling, particularly in motivational interviewing, folks. It will be difficult for you to argue with me if I don't argue with you. You will last for 10 seconds. But if I don't argue with you, I'm not fighting with you, you will really have a hard time to continue. So you will need to do something different. You will need to come up with a different strategy if I don't argue with you. Do you remember the GPS example? The GPS, even if you don't follow the directions, if you don't follow the suggestions, this device is not arguing with you. It's still working with you, observing you, listening, looking at your driving behavior every second, and making attempts to interject when it's necessary. Okay, let's watch a brief video. Please pay attention to the strategy, to the use of reflections that Dr. Moyers is using in this session.
Well, Jim, I'm glad you're here. I'm kind of surprised to see you're coming back today.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I sat out in front here for about an hour before I come in, and I was about that close to just cranking that pickup up and heading back home. I'll let you know, just like I told Rich, I'm not real happy about being here. I hope you understand that.
I'm hearing you loud and clear that being here is not something that's really a high priority for you.
And I'm looking at you and you got blonde hair. You know, I haven't had a lot of luck with blonde hair the last couple of weeks.
Is that right? Well, tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, I got assigned a probation officer, and she's a blonde-headed gal. Mm-hmm. And I think she's out to just destroy me totally. You know, she's talking about me getting a lot of jail time and this big fine and everything that she's going to do if I don't do certain things. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of think maybe you're going to do the same thing to me.
So it seems to you like I might try to push you around and make you do a whole bunch of things you don't want to do.
Yeah, and you know, I'm about up to here with this kind of stuff. I hope you know that. Probably isn't your fault, but that's just kind of the way things been going.
You're pretty fed up.
Yeah, my daughter, you know, she won't let me see the kids.
Your grandchildren. What's that about?
Well, she'll let me see them, but she won't let me take them anywhere anymore.
Really?
And that really has me upset, you know. She's afraid that I'll take them, hurt them, driving around drinking and driving, things like that. And I never have hurt one of them kids.
So she's afraid that if you take the children with you, that you'll be drinking and then you might hurt them or get in an accident.
Even when I say that I wouldn't drink, she still don't trust me now. And that's really got me upset and really got me ticked off.
So the fact that your daughter won't even take your word for the fact that you won't drink kind of bites at you a little bit. Mm-hmm.
And she said, you know, well, you need help. Well, you know, when she needed help, I damn sure didn't put any kind of condition on it, you know. And I don't know what the hell she means I need help, you know. I've always bailed her out. I've always helped her financially. If she needs kids watched, anything she needs, old daddy's always giving it to her. And I don't know where she's getting all this from. This is really...
What does she say to you about her concerns?
Well, she says she's afraid that, you know, I'll do something that'll hurt the kids. But, you know, I never hurt them kids. I never have in my life done a thing to hurt them.
Kind of a mystery to you why she'd even be worried about that?
Ever since my wife moved out. I think she's just taken an attitude with my wife, you know, that she's siding with her for some reason. You know, up until my wife moved out, things were going pretty good. You know, we're not divorced, but my wife is kind of upset at me also. She moved out 3 months ago.
Do you kind of have the feeling that your wife and daughter are ganging up against you?
It feels that way. I don't know if it's, you know, if that's true, but I just kind of feel like, what do they call it? Once they get you down, everybody jumps on. That's the way I feel now. You know, since that DWI, that car wreck and everything, and my wife's left, and my daughter's, you know, raising Cain with me. Now my probation officer's wanting to eat my lunch, put me in jail, and you know, break me financially and things like that. My boss has all but said if I lose my driver's license, I won't have a job there. I've got about 3 more years to go before I retire. So a lot of what I'm doing here, you know, or why I'm coming here, the only reason I'm coming here is so that I can maybe save my driver's license. I won't lose my job, so I won't lose my house. It's not because I want to do any of this crap. You know?
Yeah. You're not here because you think you have a problem. You're here because they sent you here.
Yeah, the court sent me here.
And that's the only reason you're here.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. There's no need of me lying to you because, you know, unless you go down and tell the court that, you know, I'm not motivated to be here or anything. But I don't like any of this. I'll be honest with you. You know, it's taking a lot of time that I don't have. It's taking a lot of money that I don't have, you know, for the court and the fines and all this stuff. And on top of that, I've got to pay my lawyer $1,000, which I don't have, to represent me. And I guess he's probably one of the reasons I'm here today. But you know, he and I drink together. You know, I've known this guy ever since he got out of law school. Yeah. And he's a good friend of mine. But I said, well, why do I have to go up there? I'm paying you $1,000 to represent me. Now I got to go over and go through this evaluation and all that. That does not make sense. And he's, well, you got a drinking problem. Hell, you know. I've had to take him home a lot of times. That I've been the one standing, he's been passed out and couldn't walk. You know, this doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense.
So it's confusing to you why your drinking should cause a problem, or everybody should be talking about that, when you look around and you see that other people drink more than you do.
Well, at this point,
Okay. I think you got a sense of what is she doing, how does she use reflections to diffuse. The client is clearly very ambivalent, very defensive. By the way, if we had time to watch until the end of this video clip, we watched only less than 5 minutes. By the minute 14, so 10 minutes later, he is already discussing the type of treatment he will agree to treatment, and we'll be discussing the type of treatment, what exactly is going to happen. So in 15 minutes, there was a significant change in his position from being very defensive and resistant to discussing the treatment plan. So you see, apparently it is possible with some skills, even with clients, patients who don't appear to be very motivated to do anything. Okay. Let's talk again. Let's go back to different types of reflections. I want to give you a more practical example. And you can actually try it with me if you wish to reflect back. This is a statement from a real patient of mine that I worked for quite some time, a patient with alcohol problem. Here's what he said. I will read it for you, although you can read it yourself, but I will read it for you so you'll have the verbal expression. I want to be honest with you, Doc. Sure, I would want to wake up one day sober, but I don't think I can do it. All my friends drink. We're friends for 40 plus years. I don't have anyone closer to me than my friends, so I don't think I can quit. I'm sure you have heard statements like this from your clients. So here's what we can do. If you want to make a simple reflection, so the person is actually honest with you and very clearly shows you that, yeah, maybe I would want to, but it's impossible. A simple reflection would be, pretty clear it would be difficult for you to quit drinking. You're not adding anything. You're not changing anything. You're just saying back, maybe not with exactly the same words, but the meaning is the same. Sounds like it will be very difficult for you to quit, even to try. You can make a little bit of rephrasing of what the person said. And in this case, the rephrasing would be, so your friends really are more valuable to you than anything else. You're not, again, you're not adding anything. You're just shifting the focus of this conversation. But you can make a number of other types of reflections that we call them a complex reflection, testing different hypotheses. For instance, you can make an amplifier reflection, just increasing the amount of tension instead of decreasing it. You may say things like, so based on what you just said, it is probably better for you to continue drinking. As strange as it sounds, that might take you into a very important conversation. You can make a paraphrasing of what the person said by saying, you really value your friendship, you're afraid of being lonely. He did not even say the word loneliness, but now you're testing a hypothesis because you need something to work with. It is conceivable that this person is really so much afraid of being lonely that he's really stuck with the friends. It just happened the friends are drinking. So this is something in therapy will be quite important to find out. And if your hypothesis is accurate, then for the next couple of weeks, we are not going to talk about alcohol at all. We will talk about loneliness, leisure time, belonging, and many other things that are not directly related to the alcohol use in this context will change. You remember the target behavior, the focus. We'll change the focus. We'll try to find what is important for the patient and for me to pay attention to. At some point, we'll get back to alcohol use, but I'm not going to be focused on alcohol if the response to my question, to my statement, actually, to my reflection, it seems like you're afraid of being lonely, is not defensive. You can do a so-called double-sided reflection. Double-sided reflection is a quite common way of reflecting in a complex way. It's a pretty common complex reflection. And the reason for making double-sided reflections is to emphasize the discrepancy. And the way it sounds like, again, you will use your language. I'm just giving you an example of what I would say. This is not a cookbook. You will use the language that you feel comfortable with. What I would say here, if I use a double-sided reflection, because clearly there is a discrepancy here. The person said, I want to wake up one day sober, but I cannot do it because of whatever. A double-sided reflection will sound like, so that's interesting. On one hand, it is difficult for you to, clearly it's difficult for you to quit drinking and because of your friends. And on the other hand, you're interested in quitting and you're just wondering how to do that. You would want to quit. You see what I'm doing? In one sentence, I'm trying to emphasize the discrepancy that does exist in the patient's statement. By doing that, please pay attention. I started with the bad news and I ended with the good news. I'm not pushing this person to do anything. The reason for me to do it in that sequence is people usually tend to remember the end of the sentence better than the beginning of the sentence. And I really want to end the sentence with the good news. So if I understood you correctly, on one hand, it is clearly very difficult for you to quit drinking, and yet at the same time, you would like to quit and you would be interested in quitting one day. Please also pay attention, in most languages, there is a temptation to start the second half of double-sided reflection with the word but. So on one hand, but on the other hand, I would suggest you to substitute the word but with the word and. Because when we say but, usually we discard everything that the person previously said, and people tend to become defensive unconsciously right there. So a double-sided reflection could sound, let me repeat again. So on one hand, clearly it is very difficult for you to quit drinking, and on the other hand, a part of you really would want to wake up sober and to do it one day. Help me understand, how do you see these two things happening together? You, in this case, you can do a real difficult type of reflections. And by the way, let me take you back to double-sided reflection. When you make a double-sided reflection, I really want to make sure you understand, please do not sound sarcastic. There is a temptation. Let's stop with this example. Imagine you have a patient, a client who is actively using amphetamines, and in your conversation with the client says, no, amphetamines is not a problem. I want to do my PhD in neuroscience. Doesn't sound like a very realistic idea. And I would understand the impulse to get into an argument. Do you hear yourself? What are you talking about? You're using crystal meth and your health is in jeopardy and your life is in jeopardy. And now you're talking about PhD in neuroscience. Are you crazy? I understand the impulse of doing that. This is the last thing I would do. My response to this statement would be, you know, that's interesting. So on one hand, you're still using drugs actively. And on the other hand, you're interested in higher education. That's an interesting idea. How do you think these two things happening together? How do you see it happening together? You might have some good thoughts. For most people, that would be difficult. You probably have some ideas how you can do these two things together. You really don't want to sound sarcastic here, because sarcasm is the fastest, the quickest, the most effective way to ruin any relationship. So if you want to get rid of your boyfriend or girlfriend, be sarcastic. That will do it in 5 minutes. I'm kidding here. So please try to stay neutral and curious. So going back to this statement, let me read it again for you. I want to be honest with you, Doc. Sure, I would want to wake up one day sober, but I don't think I can do it. All my friends drink. We are friends for 40 plus years. I don't have anyone closer to me than my friends, so I don't think I can quit. In this encounter with the client, simply because the context was appropriate, we knew each other for a long time, we had quite well-established engagement. You remember we talked about the 4 processes in motivational interviewing: engagement, focusing, evoking, planning. So we had sufficient engagement already. I worked with this patient for quite some time, and we had pretty clear target behavior. And in this case, the target behavior was his drinking. I was at luxury to do something that you probably don't want to do very early in your interaction with the client. I made a so-called amplified reflection that I really, really brought a new meaning to what the person said. My response to his statement was the following. I said, you know what? It sounds to me your friends don't care about you. And then I was listening for the reaction. The reaction could have been, Doc, this is not at all what I've said. Fine. If this is a defensive reaction like that, I would say, okay, I probably misunderstood you. Help me understand it. Tell me more about it. But the reaction, his reaction was, he was quiet for a couple of seconds, and then he said, you know, I've never thought of that this way. And then for the next couple of weeks, we didn't talk about alcohol at all. We talked about the friendship. We talked about belonging, anxieties of being alone, getting older. We talked about a lot of interesting stuff. Apparently, this was his internal fear and significant fear to be alone, to be lonely. And after that, we came back to the conversation about alcohol use and pluses and minuses. The bottom line is that this was years ago. This patient is in sustainable recovery, and I'm not saying that he's in sustainable recovery because of my reflection. I'm saying that something therapeutic happened, and maybe the way we had this conversation contributed to his recovery. So these are, as you can see, a simple statement. This is not a very simple statement, but a pretty common statement like this one actually gives you multiple opportunities to reflect using different types of reflections. And you can use any of them. You can use any of them depending on the context of your interaction and your clinical skills. How confident are you in your clinical skills? But in fact, if I ask you, if you reflect and the reflection resulted in the defensiveness, what's the worst that can happen? Nothing. You will just step back and you will say, sorry, I think I misunderstood you. Help me understand it. Keep going and tell me more about it. That's it. Just step back. Don't argue. You may have a client who tells you, and this is pretty common, a client who tells you, how come you can help me with my heroin use? You have never used heroin yourself. You know nothing about it. You're sitting in your nice office and you don't know anything about living like I do and being a heroin addict for 20 years. I'm sure you have been exposed to this kind of statements before. This is very common. And I've seen all sorts of reactions from the counselors. And I do appreciate, again, the impulse to get into argument by saying, listen, I've been trained. You see how many diplomas I have on my wall. I've been trained to help people like you. So let's work together and we will find out what to do for you. The impulse is understandable. The only result you will get from that, and I'm sure some of you have had this experience before, you will build a wall of defensiveness by doing that. We're not going to solve anything. We will create a new problem that now we have to deal with. Instead of just by telling the truth in a form of reflection. You're right. You're right. You do have experiences that I don't, and it must be really difficult for you to live like that for that long. And you're a real survivor. So tell me more. How did you do that? Tell me more about it. What is it like to live that life for 20 years? Must be really difficult for you. You see, folks, what I'm doing is I'm diffusing the defensiveness just by telling the truth, because what I said is exactly what it is. You have an experience or experiences that I don't have, and it's really curious. I'm really curious to find out more. What is it like? I would suggest you as a homework assignment. By the way, I gave you a couple of homework assignments last time. I don't know if you have done it or you didn't. I would recommend you to try to do some homework assignments. If you remember how we started the first webinar, learning motivational interviewing is very similar to learning how to play a piano or to play tennis or a foreign language. You need to practice. If you don't practice, you will learn more about motivational interviewing, but it would be difficult for you to actually do it. So, and the purpose of homework assignments is exactly to help you through practicing, to help you understand a couple of things. First, using motivational interviewing skills, initially it's more difficult than talking about it, because it all sounds easy. In real clinical setting, in real clinical situation, initially it might be difficult for you, but it will get progressively easier if you practice, and particularly if you practice with a coach or a mentor or somebody who is experienced, who can give you a feedback. So here is your homework assignment. There will be a number of statements on the next slide, and I would want you to read the statements and try to come up with at least 3 different responses to each item. This is just an example. Imagine your client says something like the following: it's been fun, but something has got to give. I just can't go on like this anymore. These are 3 different possible reflections here. You have enjoyed yourself. or you're worried about what might happen, or sounds like you believe it's time for change. So these are three different reflections. They serve three different purposes. And here is 6 statements. We're not going to do it right now. This will be your homework assignment. You have this slide. I want you, when you're at home, or if you have a chance to work with a partner or a friend of you or colleague of you, I don't know your specific situation. There are almost 1,000 people right now here. Try to find a way to think about, but even if you're alone, read carefully to these 6 statements and try to come up with at least 3 reflections. Each reflection should lead to somewhere. It should serve a therapeutic purpose. You're trying a different strategy. So whatever reflection you decide to use, just make it a reflection, not a question. Okay, I hope you will, hopefully we'll someday, somehow we will be able to review your responses and I would be able to give you a feedback, but not at this time because the online webinar would be a real difficult format to do that. Okay, let me start a little bit of listening for what exactly, and then we'll continue with this material tomorrow. Do you remember the definition of motivational interviewing? This is a client-centered and directive counseling style to help people to deal with the common problem of ambivalence. And you remember, you see there is a word directive. So that's an interesting, probably for you, concept. What makes it a directive? Because so far it sounds like we are kind of following the client wherever the client wants to take us. But this is not exactly true. The motivational interviewing is a very directive style, and here is what makes it a directive. When we talk about listening, we are listening not just for the sake of listening to show that we are interested and we are curious. This is important. In motivational interviewing, we are listening for something very specific. And here is what it is. Since we said that the material that motivational interviewing works with is the ambivalence, the verbal expression of the ambivalence are 2 different types of statements. We call them a change talk and sustain talk. These are the 2 sides of the coin. The change talk is everything that the person says in favor of moving toward change, even potentially moving toward the change. The sustain talk is everything that the person says in favor of not changing anything, keep it as is. The important thing here is that both types of statements are always present in our clinical interactions with the clients, but they're present in different proportions. You may have, from the very beginning, you may have a client giving you quite a lot of change talk, but there will be some sustained talk as well. Let me remind you, change talk is everything that the person says in favor of potential change. The change hasn't happened yet, but in favor of something that might result in a change. And sustained talk is everything that the person says in favor of keep it as is, don't change anything. And they're both present. You remember the example I gave you a couple of minutes ago when the person said, Doc, let me be honest with you. I would want to wake up one day sober, but I don't think I can do it because my friends drink and we're friends for many years and da, 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 da. You see, in this statement, you have both. You have a change talk, you have a sustained talk. The sustained talk is everything that the person says in favor of not change. Why I cannot change? Because I have friends, we're friends for 40 years, they all drink, and I don't have anybody closer to me than my friends. This is all sustained talk. These are the reasons why this person says, I will keep it as is. But there was a piece of the change talk, and the change talk was, I would want to wake up one day sober. You see, let me give you an analogy, and then we'll get into your questions. What makes motivational interviewing directive is your skill in listening and separating change talk from sustained talk. This is what we'll be doing tomorrow. And then your ability to respond only to the change talk, typically through reflections. In MI, in motivational interviewing, you don't want to reinforce the sustained talk. You really want to reinforce the change talk, making the person to talk more about the change. And the reason for us to do that is exactly the observation that Carl Rogers made many, many years ago. And then Bill Miller and Steve Rolnick, in their development of motivational interviewing, actually they confirmed through science, they confirmed that this is exactly the case. That the more the client is talking about change or potential for change or interest in changing, the more likely the change will actually happen. And the more I'm trying to convince the client that the change is necessary, automatically that will make it less likely that the change will happen, because the client will start fighting back with me. This is what Carl Rogers and then initially Miller and Rolnick called it self-motivational statements, when the person, the client, started talking about the potential of change himself or herself. In motivational interviewing, let me give you an analogy. This is what I wanted to do. In MI, have you seen people gold mining? I'm sure some of you have seen people with a pan, with a net underneath the pan, staying in the river in the cold water, and they're looking for sand. So they grab the sand from the bottom of the river. They're looking for gold. When they grab the sand, what do? They pay very close attention and they sieve this thing. They will let the sand go back. The sand is not what I'm after here. They will let the sand back. They will still pay attention. They don't want to miss a piece of gold, but the sand is not what I'm interested in. I will grab from the bottom of the river. There is no gold. The sand goes back. I will make a couple of steps left and right. We'll grab again. We'll sift again. I'm paying very close attention. There is no gold. It goes back. I will make a couple of steps further. I will grab the sand from the bottom of the river. Aha! I'm sifting. I'm paying attention. I just got a piece of gold. A small nugget of gold. What does it tell me? It tells me don't move, because I want more of it. I want a bigger piece. I want to increase the size of the gold. I'm not moving from it. I just found a spot that seems like is the one that I have something to work with. This is what recognition of the change talk and sustain talk actually means. And again, we will practice it tomorrow morning. The entire session will be about how to hear change talk and what to do with that. But I really want to end the day today with this analogy of gold mining and refer you back to the definition of motivational interviewing. This is exactly what makes MI curative. This is your clinical skill to respond only to the change talk because you really want to reinforce it. You want more of it. The second you hear the change talk, this is something that I would go after with reflections, not persuading the person. I will go with reflection. That's an interesting statement. It seems like a part of you really wants to quit drinking. Should you decide to do it, what do you think will happen? I'm not talking about the friends at this point, probably. We will get back to this conversation, but I don't want to reinforce the sustained talk. So I think it's time for questions. Let me remind you that tomorrow we will continue from this point. We will continue with the change and sustain talk recognition. First, how to recognize it, and you will do some exercises. And the second part of the webinar tomorrow will be when you recognize the change talk, what can you do? Because there are different types of change talk and there are different types of responses. What can you do with that? thank you all, and I'm ready for your questions.
Thank you very much, Igor. We've had a lot of questions come in, particularly about reflection, double-sided reflection, and we're just going to launch straight into some of these. I'm going to start with a question that might be tricky, or it might appear tricky at face value, but actually there's probably something quite deep here to discuss in a bit more detail. Joyce asks, is reflection the same essentially as clarification? And if it isn't, then what is the difference?
Reflections, simple reflections, are exactly clarifications. That's what the purpose they serve. One of the purposes is to clarify, making sure I understood you correctly. So when the person says, let's use my example, Doc, I would want to wake up sober, but I don't think I can do it because of the friends and the simple reflection could be that sounds like it would be really difficult for you to quit. So I'm trying to clarify exactly what I've heard. I'm putting a mirror. Here's what you just said, and I'm listening and I'm hearing you. And if I'm not hearing you correctly, this is your time to help me understand it better. So clarification in this case is definitely one of the functions, along with other functions. But if I use the complex reflection, the example that I gave, it seems to me that your friends just don't care about you. This is not clarification anymore. I'm testing a hypothesis, and I'm listening very careful for the reaction. If the reaction is defensive, sorry, I misunderstood you. If the reaction is not defensive, I just found a piece of gold I can work with. Hopefully I answered the question.
Okay. Sarcasm. Again, this is related to double-sided reflection. How do you avoid sarcasm when the client is always defensive in responding to your questions?
If you feel sarcastic, it means that you need to learn, or we need to learn, how to suppress it and stay neutral. If you have some level of engagement with the client is defensive, but the client is talking to you. The client did not leave your office. The client did not run away. This client is still with you. The last thing you want to do is to be sarcastic, because at this point there is some engagement already present. The client did not run away. I trained a group of probation officers. Let me give you an example. It might help. I trained a large group of probation officers. And I asked them, the first time we met, I asked them, guys, tell me, what do you do when you have the client in front of you for the first time? And they all said, well, we read them the conditions of probation as defined by the court, by the judge. This is what they have to do by law. And I said, okay, well, you still definitely need to do what you need to do, and this is a good idea. But just think about it for a second. The judge said that this person should be in your office on that day at 9 o'clock in the morning. And this person is in your office 9 o'clock in the morning. Isn't it interesting behavior? What I would do if I was you still need to read the conditions of probation, but I would ask the client, you know what, it's interesting for me. You made the decision to come to see me at 9 o'clock in the morning today, exactly as it was scheduled. Why? What do you mean, why? Because the judge said so. Yes, I appreciate that. But the judge is not here. The police officer is not here. You decided to come and to follow through with the judge's decision. It was your decision to come to see me, although you had different options. You could just ignore it, or you could run away. You decided to follow through and come and to see me, and I certainly appreciate it. I think you made the right decision, but I certainly appreciate it. What made you decide that way? Oh, I don't want to go and get in trouble and go to the jail because I have 2 kids. Okay, so kids are important for you. Bam, I just found the value system, something that is really important for this person. Now I have something to work with. This would be one of the examples of not being sarcastic and trying to explore exactly what is the important for the person at that moment. Hopefully I answered the question.
Yeah. And what about compassion? Is there a role for compassion in MI to make it more effective, or do we also need to be self-aware of the potential risks?
You know, it's difficult to answer because I don't know what is the definition of compassion in the person who asked the question, because there are different definitions of empathy. There are different definitions of compassion. Empathy and compassion are two different things, but it would be difficult to define. Difficult to answer without knowing what the definition is.
Okay.
In general, there is a number of studies. There was a conversation for a long time in addiction medicine and addiction treatment. Who is more effective? Somebody who has a personal history in recovery, so they're very empathetic, or somebody with well-established clinical skills, but with no personal history of recovery? There is a number of studies, and they show pretty much the same. The best counselors are the ones who are empathetic and have well-established clinical skills. The empathy alone, without clinical skills, is not going to help you much. But with a lot of clinical skills, with very little empathy, you won't be able to do much either. Just give the person a big book to read and send the person home. That will be pretty much the same effect. So it's really a combination between empathetic skills and clinical skills. This is what does the magic. But I don't know what the person means by compassion.
In terms of clinical skills, for a client who might be at the ambivalent stage, how could you potentially confront the client without sounding judgmental or making the client create defenses?
I just don't. I don't confront anyone. I absolutely respect your ability to make choices, to make decisions for yourself. I also respect my lack of expertise in your life. And at the end of the day, this is your life. This is not my life. I cannot fix you. If you run into a flat tire, you call road service. They will come, they will fix your tire. This is a fixing business. They have nothing to do with empathy, compassion, anything. They just fix your car and you're ready to go. I am not in a fixing business. I'm not fixing anyone. I cannot fix you. Can you fix me? No. In this case, the confrontation, the only result of a confrontation is more confrontation. Does it mean that confrontational approaches are always ineffective? You know what? It's been studied very carefully, particularly if you look at the literature on the therapeutic communities model and the confrontation, the encounter groups, one of the clinical skills in therapeutic communities. Actually, they are not terribly effective. Exactly because confrontation will suppress you, but it won't lead you to a change. The confrontation will make you to comply with certain things if you confront the person. But the compliance and behavioral change are two different things. Unfortunately, compliance lasts only as long as you have control over the person, with very predictable rebound back to the previous behavior as soon as your control fades.
We've had another question, and going back to the example that you gave when reflecting on the client that you worked with when you were working through loneliness with them. In that situation, would it have ever been right to advise him or her to leave the group of friends?
I wouldn't do that. I would not advise anything to anyone. I would ask the person, what do you think might help?
Okay.
What do you what worked for you in the past? I would not give any advice, because giving advice means that I will be, we talked about last time, when we give somebody advice, almost 100% likelihood we are telling something that this person had already considered. We are not saying anything new. So what's the point of doing that again? Particularly if the person is not asking us for advice. Then you really don't want to do that. I would keep exploring. So what do you think might help you? I understand you're in a difficult situation, but I'm sure you have some thoughts what needs to occur to change it. And I'm curious to learn from you what your thoughts are.
And so we've probably got time for a couple more. Cheryl asked, is it a protocol in MI to actually set a goal before the intervention begins?
No. And one of the differences between, for instance, motivational interviewing and cognitive behavioral therapy. In cognitive behavioral therapy, we have a clear target for each session. So cognitive behavioral therapy is more educational. Motivational interviewing is more evoking. I might have pretty good ideas what needs to occur in what the client needs to do to change something. I'm not setting it as, I'm not thinking about it as a preset goal that I will stuck with. I will keep listening from the client, what the client thinks is the target behavior today. Most likely, it will change. But if the client says, yeah, my primary concern right now is getting my PhD and finishing my PhD, and the client is actively using, a possible way to do that is use double-sided reflection, as I told you already. Help me understand it. For most people, that would be difficult to continue using drugs and work toward the PhD, which is a lot of work. How do you see it happening together? You might have some good thoughts. You probably see these two things happening together. I'm curious what your ideas are. I'm not confronting anything. I hope I don't sound sarcastic. I'm just curious, what are the client's thoughts? 2 hours from now or a couple of days from now, the target behavior will be quite different.
Okay, and just to finish up with a great question that's come in from Errol.
Yeah.
With the ongoing world pandemic going on, and we are all having to adjust to doing virtual sessions, would you say, if when conducting a session with clients, would motivational interviewing be more effective face-to-face, or does it carry the same weight via a virtual session?
I don't know the answer to that. This is a scientific question. I have never seen any research on that. I can tell you what my assumption is, what my guess, but this is just a guess. I think with good clinical skills, the online, well, two things. I don't think a computer will ever substitute a normal human, real face-to-face human contact. That's what I believe. But I'm an old guy, I might be wrong. But I think with good clinical skills, the online sessions using motivational interviewing could be as effective as face-to-face. But again, this is just my guess. We need to study this question. This is a good scientific question, and I have never seen any evidence neither for nor against. I don't know.
Thank you very much, Igor. Well, that brings us to the end of our session today. Igor, are there any closing thoughts or takeaway messages you'd like to leave our participants with?
Well, yes, I would really recommend you, if I may, try to practice reflections at home. Try to practice reflections alone. One of the ways you can do it, at least in the United States, those of you who are in the United States, you know the US is very polarized country right now. The Democrats, the Republicans, they disagree with each other. And when I do trainings in the US, I give people a homework assignment. And I tell them, you know what, I don't care what is your political belief is, it doesn't matter. If you're a Democrat, I would suggest you tonight watch 10 minutes of Fox channel, which is very Republican, and try to reflect with the intent to understand. Clearly, you will hear things that are inconsistent with your point of view, but try to suppress the desire to argue and reflect. If you're a Republican, watch CNN, which is a major, most Democratic-oriented media, and do the same. 10 minutes, listen and reflect. This is actually a good training exercise that helps suppressing your desire to argue. Remember, you will have a hard time arguing with me if I don't argue with you. This is something that is quite important in clinical settings. If you want to do some other type of homework using reflections, please do that. But if you really want to learn MI, unfortunately or fortunately, you will have to practice it.
Thank you, Igor. It's been a huge pleasure having you here tonight. Thank you to everybody who has engaged in the questions box and in the chat. We've had a huge number of questions come in. What I'm going to try and do is document what's been sent in to us, and we're going to try and capture those and hopefully get them listed on the motivational interviewing network area on the ISSUP.net website, so that we can hold a discussion on that sort of at our leisure. Yeah, thank you very much, Igor. We're looking forward to having you back tomorrow. There's going to be a fourth session. We're going to be continuing with the fundamentals of motivational interviewing. We hope you can all join us. The link for that is on our website. We're also going to post the link on Twitter and on our Facebook page. So yeah, look out for that. We'll also send a follow-up email to everybody after this event, and I'll make sure that the registration link for session 4 is in that. So please join us tomorrow evening. Once again, my thanks to Igor. The recordings are all going to be available on the website. In the knowledge share, we're creating a page that has the slides and the video of each of the sessions, so you'll be able to watch this again. And yeah, we hope you can join us, and thank you, Igor.
Thank you all.